What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Echoes of Elsewhere, the podcast where we get a glimpse into the abandoned through urban exploration. I'm your host, Courtney Autumn, and here we are. Somehow we've made it to the end of season 1, and honestly, what a wild ride it's been. I've crawled through some busted doors, stepped on some questionable staircases and ladders and foundations in general. And I have dodged a few vultures, all in the name of bringing you guys good content, good photographs, good stories, all of the above. So, as we are wrapping up this first season, I figured that it was only right to slow down for a second, catch my breath, and talk about some of my absolute favorite explores from these past few months. The ones that really stuck with me, whether because of the history or because I almost fell through the floor. It could go either way, honestly. So, first on my list of bandos, and these are in no particular order, by the way, because it was hard enough for me to choose 3. Y'all are lucky y'all aren't getting like a top 11, truly. But I narrowed it down to 3. And like I said, these are in no particular order. These are just the top 3 bandos I've had for this particular season of the podcast. For those of you who don't know, I think the podcast is roughly 3 or 4 months old. So these are the explores that I've done over the last 3 or 4 months since starting the podcast. Anyway, one of my top 3 is what I have called the River House in the past, but it is also known in the Urbex community as the Doomsday House or the Doomsday Prep House, something along those lines. It was one of the first bandos I explored when starting this podcast and when getting back into making content for Urbex and just doing Urbex in general, really. So, yeah, the Doomsday House is one of my favorites. It probably always will be. It was just a very unexpected surprise. At the time, I hadn't seen any videos on it, shockingly, because it's pretty well known. I definitely thought I was the first one to document it, so that's how out of the loop I was. To my disappointment, I was far from the first. And I don't know how often you can ever really be the first these days. You know, there might be some people who get to first document certain spaces, but we're hardly ever the first to step into a bando and explore it. So I don't know what I was thinking, really. But the Doomsday House really stands out to me, not just because it was my first real explore getting back into things, but just the energy around the house was really interesting. It's a beautiful house, a very typical 1970s style house. It was a big house. It was near the water. The owner was someone who was really interesting. He was an industrial engineer, and he just seemed really brilliant and really smart. Also, obviously, a little bit unique in the fact that he appeared to have been a doomsday prepper. I don't really know how true that is. I've talked to some of the locals around here that knew him and that know his family, and they basically just said that he was kind of a quirky person that liked to hoard a lot of stuff, but they had no knowledge of him being like a doomsday prepper. But I don't know how many doomsday preppers go out and like vocalize that they are doomsday preppers. So maybe it was true and he just never talked about it with people outside of maybe his family or whoever lived with him in the house, obviously. But long story short, there was this huge basement that could have practically been an underground bunker, I guess. And he just was storing all kinds of shit down there. But I also found out later that he just had his hands in everything kind of situation. Like he fixed cars, he fixed radios, he, I think, was like a landlord and had several properties that he was renting out. He was a builder, obviously, of many different things. He built a full-on pipe organ inside of this house for his wife. So it was just interesting for so many different reasons. But you could just tell that there was something special about this house. And I don't really know how to further elaborate on that, to be honest with you. But if you're in the urbex community and if you've seen videos of the Doomsday House or you've been inside yourself, you probably know what I mean. It's just a very different house. The build is different. The style of the house is different. The layout of the house is different. I found out later that he intentionally built this house with a solar passive design. And I don't know anything about architecture or the terminology of certain builds and whatnot. I'm not very seasoned in this regard, but I had to look it up. And I found out that a solar passive design is basically just a design where you position the house and the windows and all of these different factors are at large to where you get this natural light in your house at all times of the day kind of situation. There's more to it than that. So, again, as always, don't quote me on stuff, but I'm just rambling at this point. But yeah, the Doomsday House is one of my favorites. And like I said, it probably always will be. It was the start of this journey, but it was also just such a beautiful space. And it's one of few bandos that I've gone into and immediately fallen in love with it enough to be like, listen, who can we buy this from? Because I want it. So it was one of those things where I kind of got attached to it. And I hate saying that almost because I try not to get attached to bandos, especially because I know that a lot of them end up getting torn down or ruined or whatever. They aren't as everlasting as I would like for them to be. Some of them are harder to get rid of, like the big asylums and stuff like that. But yeah, the Doomsday House is top notch. I don't know for certain if it's been torn down yet, but I know that it is in its final days if it hasn't already been demolished. So that's another reason why it's special, but also bittersweet. Anyway, moving on to another one of my top 3 places explored this season is a textile factory that I explored with back roads to Abandoned, Urbex Georgia Jen, and Rose Urbex, who have all been on the podcast for interviews. But we went out on a big explore day together and we got to hit a few spots. And this one was the primary one that we were after because it is 234 acres, if I'm not mistaken, of just factory space and industrial space. And like I said, it's a textile mill or it's a textile plant. It's a textile and dyeing and finishing plant, I think is what it is. But anyways, point is, it's one of my favorites. And there's a lot of reasons why, but primarily because I had been wanting to do a big factory explore or a big industrial explore for many, many months leading up to this. So I was really geeked up when we arrived. I was super excited. And yeah, it was a really, really good time. There were several buildings. It was endless. I mean, we didn't even get to see it all for various different reasons. But basically, we think that there were people probably selling drugs on the site and maybe even making the drugs on the site. We didn't see them, but that's our assumption. There was weird activity going on there that we caught on to after being there for a little while because we spent most of the day out there. I mean, we were out there for hours. So yeah, it was a really good time though, in spite of a few sketchy circumstances. But like I said, we didn't see anything and no one bothered us and it was all good. I got to climb finally and I didn't really even climb as high as I wanted to, shockingly. But there was there was enough risky danger out there all on its own. Some of the buildings had weird roof accesses or outdoor access, and it was on like a top floor and you're kind of looking down into these, I don't even know what to call it really. It's very hard to explain. If you go on my website though, then you'll see. there's a section for abandoned landscapes, and the factory explores on there. There's a lot of pictures of that one. Like I said, it's 234 acres. It's a lot of stuff. I got to see a lot. There was endless towers out there, silos, like I said, factory buildings, big warehouse buildings, ruins and decay. It was a beautiful mess. It really was. And it's definitely the largest property I've explored so far. So I don't know what else is going to be 234 acres in the future. I'm not saying it won't happen, but it'll probably be a while. I realized in that explore that I really, really love industrial sites. It just made me feel like I was on a playground. It really did. I was like, ooh, from one building to the next, go up a tower, go up a ladder, climb this, look at that. And it was great. It was really great. And of course, it's always a good time with the Urbex ladies. So I consider the Textile plant another one of my favorites, not just because of the property and because of all the great content I was able to dish out from that specific explore, because it was just so, like I said, it was endless. And I still didn't get to see it all, but it was also super special because I got to explore with some new friends that I made in the Urbex community. And that was actually my first time exploring with Rose and with Jen. So yeah, it was a good intro explore to our friendship. Anyway, the final one in my top 3 Bandos explored for the season is what we in the Urbex community have deemed the school teacher's house. If you listen to my interview with Abandoned Southeast, you have heard the story on this one, but long story short, I have been following Abandoned Southeast for many, many years, and some time ago, a long time ago, he did this specific house, and I knew that it was in my area somewhere, and I scoured Google Maps forever, literally forever, since last year. And a few weeks ago, I finally found it, and it was by accident. I was looking for something totally different, and I was going through maps, and I just feasted my eyes on it by accident. I was like, holy shit, this is that freaking house. And I got so excited that I had to go there the next day. And I did. And I knew it would be one of my favorites just based on the vibe and the aesthetic and the whole thing. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful house. But it's almost too beautiful, if you know what I mean. Like, it doesn't even look really abandoned. So that's the only downside. I like a little bit of decay or a little bit of ruins or a little bit of some sort of sign that it's abandoned. But this one, it was actually kind of hard to tell. It looks like we just kicked some old lady out the house and said, we're going to take pictures. And yeah, but it was also great for that reason. You know, you can never have a perfect combo between it being untouched and looking abandoned. Like, putting those two things together is actually kind of hard. Anyway, I absolutely loved the school teacher's house. I knew I would. Like I said, there's just so much to it. And I don't really know the whole backstory, to be honest with you. From what I've heard and from what I remember, if I remember correctly, the lady who owned it passed away. And I think that all of her family is scattered out in other states. And I heard somewhere through the grapevine that it might be tied up in probate. So I don't know if it'll eventually go to a relative or if it already has. There's no way to tell. But in any case, it's a beautiful house and a beautiful explorer. And it's just perfect, to be honest with you. I think that'll be one of my favorites for a long time too. It was just so very exquisite. And yeah, again, a good energy in the house. I never got a bad feeling. I never felt weird. Some bandos, really a lot of bandos that I walk into, especially houses, have a very, I don't want to say a negative energy, but it's a very intense energy, and some of the energies coming from some of the bandos I've been in is very off-putting, and not enough to keep me from exploring it, obviously, but there's just something about it that's just like, this isn't as inviting as you would like for it to be. Not that an abandoned house usually is, but the teacher's house was awesome. Again, if you guys want to visit the website, the link is always in the description. You can also find the link in my Instagram bio and on my YouTube channel, on my Facebook page. Just look up Echoes of Elsewhere podcast. You'll find me. I relaunched the website, so it has a whole new layout, a whole new vibe, a whole new situation. So do feel free to check it out. But the point is, all of my explores that I've done will be on there. Most of them already are. The teacher's house is on there. The 3 that I talked about are on there. So if you want to see my top 3 bandos of season 1 for yourself, feel free to check those out. But yeah, those places, they are just the kind that stay with you, not just because of the photos, but because of the feeling. Like I said, that rush of stepping inside, knowing you're somewhere that you're not supposed to be, and somewhere that is slowly being swallowed by time and nature and probably asbestos. But you know what made this season the most special of all is you guys. Every explorer who came on the show and sat down to talk with me, I am beyond grateful. Sharing your stories, your passion, some of your near-death experiences, and some of your I almost got arrested experiences. It made Echoes of Elsewhere way more than just a podcast. You trusted me with your time and your wildest stories, and that really means everything. So shout out to all of the guests that appeared on season 1. Kay and Agonio, also known as No Tracers, Backroads to Abandoned, the Luke Explores, Big Banks, Urbex Georgia Jen, Rose Urbex, and Abandoned Southeast. You guys are what really brought season 1 together for me, and I really just appreciate that you guys took the time out of your schedules. I know that you all have super busy lives, whether it's busy exploring or having a family or having other side projects or having other main projects. Some of you do the urbex on the side. Whichever way it goes, I do acknowledge that we are all adults and we're all busy. So I really, really appreciate you guys for coming on the podcast and for sharing your experiences and your insight and your tips, and really just for everything. You guys are all legends in the urbex community, and I am so proud of this podcast, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that you guys appeared on it. So again, thank you so much. And of course, to you listeners, let me just start by saying thank you for being here, for every episode you tuned into, every message you sent, every comment you left, every time you shared the podcast with someone else who gets what we do. I see you. And I could not do this without your support and your love for the weird and the abandoned and all of the things that a lot of people are not usually into. You guys have really established a really cool community around this podcast and around urbex, and I just appreciate you guys so much, like I said, for your time, for being here, for tuning in, and for interacting with me and sharing the podcast. Again, it would not be any of what it is if it wasn't for you listeners. You guys make up like 50% of the show, to be honest with you. You guys basically guarantee the success of this. It is true. Also, a huge shout out to the new friends that I've made in the urbex community over the past few months. Honestly, this is the part that I didn't expect when I started this. How many incredible, hilarious, and slightly unhinged in the best way. People I'd meet along the way. You've all made Urbex in general and the season of this podcast unforgettable. And I can't wait to explore with the ones I haven't yet. And I can't wait to keep exploring with those of you that I have. With all of that said, don't worry, because this is not the end, not even close. Season 2 is already in the works, and trust me, it is going to be even crazier. More interviews, more questionable ladders, more places that probably should have been condemned twice. And the best part, season 2 officially drops on my birthday, which is April 10th. Because what better way to celebrate surviving another year than by crawling through more abandoned buildings? Anyways, mark your calendars for April 10th when season 2 begins. More stories, more madness, and hopefully fewer vulture encounters and lots of bando success. Hopefully. Until then, keep exploring the allure in the abandoned, the beauty of decay, and the echoes of elsewhere.